Last summer, I decided to take a solo road trip from Oregon to Wyoming. I'd planned it out so I could drive straight through, avoiding an extra night in a hotel. The route was mostly empty. Aside from the first hour leaving the city and the last stretch near my destination, it was all endless plains, patches of forest, and the occasional low hill as I got closer to Wyoming. I knew it'd be a long haul, driving through the night and into the next day, but I figured it'd be worth it to save time that I set out at 6 p.m., double-checking my supplies, my duffel bag, a cooler of drinks, and some snacks stashed in the passenger seat. The first hour was busy, weaving through suburban streets and little towns, but after that, it was just me and the open road. Traffic thinned out fast, and there wasn't much to see, just the rare gas station every 20 miles or so. By the second hour, my tank was still 2/3 full, but with the stations getting scarcer, I decided to stop and fill up before hitting the really isolated stretches. After about 25 minutes of cruising, I spotted a tiny rundown gas station, just 3 pumps and a shuttered convenience store. No one else was around. I pulled up, hopped out, and started fueling. The pump was ancient, trickling gas so slowly it took nearly a minute to get half a gallon. I leaned against my truck, staring into the dark when headlights caught my eye. A car rolled by on the highway. Speed limit was 60, but they were crawling at maybe 25. They passed the station, then slowed even more, reversed, and turned in, parking at the pump right next to mine. Odd move, especially on a quiet road like that in the dead of night, but I brushed it off. Maybe they just missed the turn that I heard their door creak open and footsteps shuffle to the side of their car. But after a minute, there was no sound, no pump starting, no movement. Curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced over. A guy stood there, tall, wearing a dark hoodie and faded cargo pants. He was staring right at me, eyes locked on mine when I turned. I gave a quick, uneasy smile and a nod, then looked back at my pump. The air felt heavier, like his gaze was still boring into me. Finally, after what felt like forever, I heard him grab the nozzle and start filling his tank. I relaxed a little. Maybe I'd just been paranoid that MY pump was still dragging, but I'd had enough waiting. I capped my tank, and as I did, I caught him staring again. His face was pale, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in days, but was wired somehow. I didn't linger, climbed into my truck, and peeled out onto the highway. Creepy, sure, but I shook it off as some weird loner, and kept driving. 3 hours later, around 11:30 p.m., a drizzle started. I'd been on the road for 5 hours now, and the rain made everything harder, blurry lines, slick asphalt. I cracked open a soda and munched on some chips, but exhaustion was creeping in fast. By midnight, I couldn't push anymore. My gas was dipping low again, so I kept an eye out until I found another station. Faded sign, flickering lights, just as deserted as the last. I pulled in, topped off the tank, then parked beside the building to rest. I checked my phone, no signal, no nearby towns, just a weather app saying the rain wouldn't let up soon. I reclined my seat, set a 30-minute alarm, and passed out that I woke up to rain drumming on the roof. My alarm hadn't gone off yet, only 20 minutes had passed. Rubbing my eyes, I sat up and peered through the windshield. The lot was still empty, except for one thing, a car at the far pump. I squinted. It looked exactly like the one from before. Same color, same shape. My stomach dropped. Either this was a wild coincidence, or something was seriously off. Worse, I couldn't see the guy anywhere, not by the pumps, not in his car. Panic started clawing at me. I fumbled for my keys, started the engine, and shifted into reverse. As I checked my rearview mirror, I froze. He was there, in my back seat. Those hollow eyes stared back at me through the dark. I yelled, flung my door open, and stumbled out onto the wet pavement. My truck was still in gear, rolling backward slowly. I bolted for the trees lining the lot, heart pounding, and glanced back. The truck kept drifting, then jerked to a stop. A second later, the guy climbed into the driver's seat and sped off, tires squealing, leaving me stranded that I stood there, soaked and shaking, processing it all. My phone, my wallet, everything was in the truck. Then I noticed his car, still sitting by the pump. I crept over, half expecting a trap. The door was unlocked, keys dangling in the ignition. A bag of groceries, bread, canned soup, sat in the back, and on the passenger floor was a phone. Locked, but I could still dial 911. I called, voice trembling as I explained everything to the dispatcher. Later, the cops told me the truth. That car wasn't his. It was stolen, just like he'd stolen mine. The groceries, the phone, belongings from someone else he'd targeted before me. That person hadn't gotten away unscathed, either. They'd found them a county over, roughed up bad. The investigators figured he'd slipped into my truck while I slept, planning to wait until I was driving again to make his move. Maybe to rob me, maybe worse. They never caught him. My truck's still gone too. I don't know what he wanted, but I know I'm lucky to be standing here telling this story. This happened last winter, right around mid-February. I live in a modest cabin in a quiet, forested area about an hour outside of town. It's the kind of place where the trees outnumber the people, and you don't get many visitors. That day, I'd only worked a half shift, so I was looking forward to a relaxing night at home. Around 6:30 p.m., my phone rang, my buddy Jake. His truck had broken down again, and he needed a lift home. He sweetened the deal with the promise of burgers, so I didn't mind. I'd bailed him out before, so it wasn't a big deal. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, snatched my keys, and swung the front door open. I nearly dropped everything. There was a guy standing on my porch, inches from the threshold. He was bundled in a thick parka, a dark scarf pulled up over his chin. I jumped back, heart racing, but he didn't flinch, just stood there, still as a statue. I laughed it off awkwardly, feeling silly for getting spooked, and asked what he wanted. He muttered an apology, saying he'd been about to knock. Then he paused and asked if I was Mark or Mike, some name that wasn't mine. I told him no, and he just nodded, said all right, and shuffled off down the steps. I locked the door behind me, watching him disappear down the long gravel path to the road before I hopped in my car. The whole drive to Jake's job, I couldn't shake that weird encounter. My place is tucked away. Nobody just stumbles onto your doorstep out here. If he was lost, fine, but it still felt off. Anyway, I picked up Jake, we swung by a diner for some food, and I dropped him off at his apartment. It was pushing 8:30 p.m. by then. A light snow had started falling, dusting the ground, but the night was still quiet. I got home, parked in the driveway, and let myself in, kicking off my boots and settling onto the couch with the TV on. I didn't have work the next day, so I lost track of time, probably zoned out for a couple hours before I started yawning. I shut off the TV, stretched, and headed for the stairs. Passing the front door, though, that guy from earlier popped back into my head. I brushed it off, but now it nagged at me. To settle my nerves, I peeked through the little window beside the door. The porch was empty, snow still drifting down gently. But then I saw something, tracks in the fresh snow, cutting across the driveway. They started at the road, curved toward my car, and veered off into the yard where the pines swallowed them up. My stomach twisted. I locked the door tight and stepped back, suddenly wide awake. If that guy had come back, this wasn't random. I kept glancing out the windows, trying to figure out what to do. The more I thought about our earlier run-in, the stranger it seemed, his flat tone, the way he just stood there. I grabbed my phone and called 911, pacing as I explained to the operator. While I was talking, I kept hearing something faint, like a creak or a shuffle, but it'd stop whenever I went quiet. I probably sounded paranoid. Then, out of nowhere, a loud bang rattled the house from the back. I yelped, nearly dropping the phone. Another bang followed as I crept toward the kitchen. Through the glass pane in the back door, I could just make out a shape moving in the dark. A third crash hit, hard, like they were swinging something heavy. The operator told me to hide or get out. I chose out. I snatched my keys, bolted for the front door, and ran to my car, half expecting someone to jump me. The driveway was clear, though, and I made it inside, peeling out onto the road. Good thing I did. When the cops showed up later, they found the back door smashed in, muddy snow tracked all over my floors. No one was there, though. I gave them what little I had, a vague description of the guy from earlier. No proof it was him, and they never found anyone matching it. My stuff was still there, so it wasn't a robbery, just a break-in that got interrupted. Looking back, running into him when I did might have saved me. If I'd stayed in all night, I wouldn't have checked the door before bed. If I'd been asleep, they could have slipped in quietly. I don't know what they wanted, money me, or something else. It was just a normal day until it wasn't. Whoever it was, they're still out there. Some nights, I catch myself listening for footsteps in the snow, wondering if they'll try again. Back in 2020, I was a junior in college, picking up babysitting gigs a few nights a week to chip away at my motorcycle payments. For a couple of months, I'd been watching this quiet little 4-year-old girl every Thursday. Her parents were laid back, always polite, and usually headed out right around her bedtime. My job was simple: keep an eye on her while she slept, make sure everything was fine, and wait out the 3 or 4 hours until they got back. They'd leave around 7:30 p.m., and that night was no different. I rolled up to their place, a cozy house on the edge of a sleepy suburb, at 7:45. The parents greeted me, said she was already tucked in and headed out. I never pried about where they went, maybe a late dinner in town or something. Didn't matter to me that I dropped my backpack by the door, did my usual lap around the house, kitchen, hall, living room, and settled into an armchair. They'd always say, "Help yourself to the fridge, watch whatever you want." But I usually just scrolled on my phone to kill time, popping by her room now and then to check on her. About 45 minutes in, my phone buzzed. It was the mom. I picked up, puzzled, and she asked if I'd just called her. I hadn't. I was still at the house, hadn't touched the dial. She said she'd gotten a silent call from some random number and thought maybe it was me on a burner or something. I told her everything was fine, and she said, "Okay, good," then hung up. Probably just a worried parent thing, I figured, and went back to my routine. Not long after, maybe 30 minutes, I noticed a glow seeping through the living room curtains. Headlights. I assumed it was someone pulling into the next door driveway, but the light didn't flicker off. Curious, I got up and nudged the curtain aside. A beat-up black pickup was parked along the street, right in front of the house. It looked rough, dented, tinted windows so dark I couldn't see inside. I stared at it, trying to figure it out, when I spotted a guy standing near the mailbox, just off the curb. He was gazing up at the house, hands in his pockets. Uneasy, I stayed put. Didn't want to start trouble at someone else's place. After a bit, he ambled back to his truck and drove off real slow, like he was still scoping the place out. I watched the taillights fade down the road, cutting through the shadows of the pines, until they paused way down the street and winked out. Maybe he'd parked again. Could have been someone lost, hunting for an address. I lingered by the window for a few minutes, but he didn't circle back, so I let it go and returned to the armchair that didn't text the parents. Didn't want to freak them out over nothing. Instead, I flipped on the TV, kept the volume low, and cracked the curtains a bit wider to ease my mind. Time dragged on, probably an hour or two. I was fighting sleep, eyes drooping, half dozing but still aware. Then, out of nowhere, a soft thud snapped me out of it. I blinked, waiting, and it hit again. I stood, ears straining. First instinct was to check the kid, so I headed for the hallway, but another thud stopped me cold. Something moved in my peripheral, a figure at the side door, yanking the handle. He locked eyes with me through the glass, then started jerking it harder, like he meant to rip it off the hinges. Panic surged. I bolted upstairs, scooped the girl from her bed. She stirred but stayed calm, and clutched her tight. The thuds turned into bangs, heavy and deliberate, like he was smashing something against the door. I raced back down as a sharp crack echoed, with splintering. I hit the hallway just as the side door flew open. A guy stormed in, jeans, a flannel shirt, sandy hair, knife glinting in his hand. He charged straight for me. I didn't think, just ran out the front, fumbled into my car with the kid, and peeled out as he reached the driver's window, fist banging the glass. I sped to a gas station a mile away, called 911, then the parents. By the time anyone got to the house, he was long gone. Police found the side door busted in, but nothing stolen. I told them about the guy in the truck, but it wasn't much to go on. My guess? He was after the kid, maybe to hold me at knife point to get her. How he knew the parents were out, I've got no clue. What's weirder is the aftermath. The parents thanked me that night, frantic but grateful, then cut all contact. Never hired me again, wouldn't answer my texts. Like they wanted me out of the picture. I dug around a little online, found an old article about the dad being tied to some shady guy from years back. Someone who kinda matched the intruder's build. Could be nothing, just me connecting dots. It's been years now, and no one's tracked him down. No answers either. Just a night that went from quiet to chaos in a heartbeat. It was a Wednesday evening last fall. I'd clocked out of my shift at 7:30 p.m. and headed home to jump into some late-night gaming with my crew online. I'd split from my partner earlier that year, so the house was just me, a quiet shell I filled with work and virtual hangouts. Gaming until dawn had become my routine, and honestly, I loved it. The forecast had warned of a nasty storm rolling in, high winds, possible flooding. But around here, they hype up every drizzle, so I didn't sweat it. Around 10:45 p.m., I was deep into a match, headset on, when a huge blast of wind rocked the house. The walls groaned, and I yanked one earpiece off. Rain was hammering down, relentless, and the place felt like it was trembling. I leaned toward my mic to tell the guys, but before I could finish, my monitor blinked out, the lights flickered, then snapped back on for a heartbeat before everything died, PC, lamps, all of it. Pitch black. I couldn't see a thing. Groping around my desk, I found my phone, flicked on the flashlight, and grumbled my way downstairs to the front window. Between the sheets of rain, I couldn't tell if the neighbors were dark too. Most folks were probably asleep by then anyway. That I shot a quick text to the group chat. Power's out, probably done for the night. Irritated, I navigated to the garage with my phone's weak beam, digging out an old portable charger I kept for emergencies. It wasn't much, but it'd juice up a fan or a light. As I lugged it back upstairs, I heard a faint thud behind me. The garage was a mess, old shelves, stacked bins, but the wind howled louder right then, so I chalked it up to the storm rattling the place. I set the charger up in the den, plugged in a small lamp, and let it glow. I've always hated crashing without power on, some weird quirk. So I cracked the blinds, flopped onto the recliner, and switched to mobile data to browse videos. An hour ticked by, maybe more. The storm hadn't let up, so I got restless and stepped onto the back deck. The awning kept the rain off, and I scanned the street. A few houses nearby had porch lights glowing. Guess it wasn't a full blackout. Weird. I checked online for outage reports, but found zilch. Back inside, my phone pinged. A text from an unknown number saying something like, "Down lines in your area, expect delays." No official tag, no utility logo. Odd, but I shrugged it off and sank back into the recliner, half watching the storm, half listening to my phone. Then I heard it, a creak, sharp and familiar, like a boot hitting the old wooden stairs to the garage. I'd lived here long enough to know that sound. I froze, then eased up, moving soft and slow toward the hall. My phone light barely cut through the dark. I peeked around the corner. Nothing, but the garage door was ajar, swinging slightly. No chance I'd left it like that. I edged closer, aimed the light down the steps, and saw only shadows. No way was I going down there blind. I shut the door, heart picking up, still trying to convince myself it was nothing. Back in the den, lightning flashed, and unease crawled up my spine. Something felt wrong, like I wasn't alone. Before I could shake it, heavy steps thundered up the garage stairs, pounding the floorboards even through the closed door. I lunged, slamming my weight against it just as the handle jiggled. Someone was on the other side, shoving hard, then hammering it with their fists. It was a flimsy interior door, no lock, no give. They bashed it for what felt like forever, maybe a minute, until I yanked out my phone and dialed 911. The pounding stopped. Footsteps retreated down the steps, fast. I didn't wait, grabbed my keys, bolted to my truck, and peeled out. From across the street, I watched the house for 10 minutes, rain blurring everything. No one came out. Cops showed up, swept the place, and found the back door wide open. Guy was gone. Here's the kicker. That text about the outage? Fake. Sent from some burner phone. Whoever it was had my number, knew I'd go outside to check the neighbors. Probably figured I'd head to the garage to flip the breaker. Because there was no outage, they'd cut my power themselves. Cops think it was targeted, not random, but they've got no leads. No clue who it was or why. Just me and an empty house, still waiting for the lights to feel safe again. This happened a couple summers back when I went camping with my close friend. I'll call him Max. We'd pitched tents a handful of times before, but we were still pretty green at it. Up until then, we'd stuck to busy campgrounds with plenty of folks around, nothing too wild. This time, though, we wanted to level up, find a real spot deep in the woods with a killer view. After some digging online, we picked a place about 2.5 hours from home. It was a 3-hour trek into the wilderness, barely documented. Just a few blurry shots from past campers. Seemed perfect. Remote, quiet, ours that we drove out, geared up for a 2-night stay, and parked at a tiny gravel pull-off at the end of a forgotten road. No other cars, just us. The trailhead was rough, overgrown with weeds, roots poking through like it hadn't been touched in ages. I wasn't expecting a paved path or anything, but this felt like stepping into a ghost story. Still, we pressed on. By late afternoon, we reached the site, a flat patch of dirt on a low ridge rimmed with trees. It wasn't much, but the view was unreal, rolling hills and a sea of green stretching out below. No signs of life, no trash, no footprints. It was ours. We set up camp. Max fumbled with his tent longer than I did, so I wandered to the ridge's edge to soak in the scenery. That's when I caught it, movement down in the thickets. Squinting, I made out shapes, 3 or 4 figures weaving through the trees. Too far to tell if they were hikers or what, just vague outlines slipping through the brush. I called Max over, excited to spot anyone out here, but by the time he shuffled up, they'd vanished into the foliage. We shrugged it off and got back to settling in, chatting and kicking back as the sun dipped low. Dusk came, and we sparked a little fire, just enough to warm our hands. For a while it was peaceful, crickets humming, flames popping. Then maybe an hour in, something cut through the quiet, voices. Distant, muffled, like a conversation drifting from the woods. We couldn't catch words or even pin the language, just a low murmur from multiple throats. Max and I froze, straining to listen. They didn't seem to move, just lingered out there in the dark until they stopped dead. No fade out, no retreat, just silence. A beat later, leaves crunched. One set of steps. Coming our way, that a guy stepped into the firelight, scruffy beard, wearing a faded green trucker hat. He grinned wide and asked, "You two know where the path is?" "Been wandering a bit." I nodded toward the trail we'd come up, but he just stood there, so I asked if he was with the voices we'd heard. His grin faltered, then snapped back. "Nah, just me out here. Haven't seen anyone else. Would have asked them for help if I had." It didn't add up. He'd come from right where the voices were, and they'd been loud enough to notice. I muttered, "Right," and he gave a nod, then sauntered off down the trail. Max and I locked eyes. That guy was full of it, had to be. No way he'd missed a group that close. But why lie? What was he hiding? We hashed it out by the fire for maybe 20 minutes, voices low, nerves creeping up. The whole time, it felt like eyes were on us. I kept glancing at the trees, the trail. Something was off. This was our first real backwoods trip, and the isolation was hitting hard. "Let's just go," Max finally said, voice tight. I didn't argue. We started breaking camp, that weird vibe growing heavier. As we slung our packs on and doused the fire, a twig snapped behind us that we whipped around. Without the flames, it was inky black, silent too, like the forest was holding its breath. My hand shook as I fished a headlamp from my bag and flicked it on. There he was, the trucker hat guy, maybe 20 feet off, staring blank-faced. Then that grin crept back. I killed the light, and we booked it down the trail. Footsteps exploded behind us, his and more, crashing through the undergrowth on both sides. We didn't stop, just ran, packs bouncing, until the sounds tapered off. By the time we hit the car, it was just us, panting and rattled. We jumped in and tore out of there. That night stuck with us. We haven't camped since, might never. Who was out there? Why lie about it? Why chase us? I still don't know. All I've got is the memory of that grin and the sound of feet in the dark. This was in the fall of 2022. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and back then, I was living out of state, grinding through my last year at a college far from home. Our campus had an early fall break, so I decided to drive back to see my folks. It was a solid 3-day haul across flat, endless highways, but I'd take the road over a plain any day. I hit the gas on a Monday afternoon, leaving later than I meant to, but still making decent time. I didn't have a strict plan, just a rough idea of where I'd crash the first night. After about 11 hours, stopping only for snacks and fuel, I called it quits around 9 p.m. At a dingy gas station, I pulled up my phone and hunted for a nearby motel. I was in the sticks, but there had to be something within 30 miles. Luck was on my side. A spot popped up not far off. The map sent me down a narrow lane jetting off the highway, a cracked stretch of pavement with flickering streetlights that barely cut the dark. No traffic, just me. 5 minutes later, I rolled through a sleepy little town, think faded signs and sagging porches, until I hit the motel at the road's end. It was a squat, weathered building, parking lot empty. I grabbed my duffel and headed in. The lobby was gloomy, lights buzzing faintly, and no one was around. No chatter, no hum of life, just stillness. After a moment, a guy shuffled out from a back room, blinking at me like I'd startled him. He recovered fast, checked me in with a nod, and handed me a key for a room down the hall that I trudged to the last door, let myself in, and dropped onto a lumpy armchair. The place was basic, peeling wallpaper, a bed that looked older than me, but I wasn't picky. I kicked back, scrolling through my phone, and must have dozed off watching clips. A loud bang on the door jolted me awake. I shot upright, groggy, and checked the time. 11:30 p.m. wary. I crossed the room and cracked the door. Nothing. I leaned out, peering down the dim hallway. Empty, silent. I stood there, half expecting a prankster to pop out, but it was dead quiet. Shaking my head, I wondered if I'd imagined it or if it came from another room. I brushed it off, took a quick shower, and crawled into bed, setting an alarm for 7 a.m. Another long drive loomed, and I needed rest. Sleep didn't last. Another bang ripped me awake, louder this time. The room was black, just a thin glow seeping under the door. I stumbled up, heart thumping, and yanked it open. Empty again. The hall stretched out, shadowy and still. Fed up, I decided to get answers. I padded to the lobby, where the same guy sat behind the counter, hunched over a magazine. I told him about the knocking, asked if he'd seen anyone. He frowned, then gave me a weird look, like I was pulling his leg. When he saw I was serious, he said, "You're the only one here tonight. No other guests." I forced a grin, muttered, "Got it," and headed back, his words sinking in slow. Back in the room, I triple-checked the locks and flopped onto the bed, staring into the dark. Was I losing it? I grabbed my phone from the side table to distract myself, but as the screen flared, it lit up something, someone, standing in the far corner. Motionless, just watching. My chest seized. I scrambled back, fumbling with the locks as heavy steps charged behind me. I flung the door open and bolted down the hall, the guy's boots pounding closer. The clerk looked up as I burst into the lobby, then past me wide-eyed. He was dialing 911 when the man hit the room, hoodie, wiry frame, then veered sharp and tore out the front exit, vanishing into the night on foot. The clerk swore he didn't know the guy, insisted I was the only one checked in. Cops showed up, did a sweep, but the motel's 2 grainy cameras, one inside, one out front, caught nothing useful. Best guess? He slipped in while I was at the desk the first time. Why he was there, what he wanted, no clue. I grabbed my stuff and bailed right then, driving an hour to the next town before I could breathe again. Still don't know who he was or how he picked me. It's the kind of thing that sticks with you, random, quiet terror in the middle of nowhere. This was just over a year ago. In our little town, there's this old place, a rundown shack tucked deep in the pines. That had been empty for at least 15 years. It used to be someone's home, but after it sat unsold, the forest swallowed it up. Overgrown, forgotten, falling apart. I've always been drawn to spots like that, creepy, abandoned relics, and I'd poke around them whenever I got the chance. One lazy Saturday morning, with no work on the books, I decided to check it out. Usually I'd drag a buddy along, but this place was a quick hike from my street, nothing fancy, so I went solo with just a sling bag and a headlamp. The path in was a mess, barely a trail anymore, choked with weeds and vines. I trudged through, flipping on my headlamp as the trees thickened. It took longer than I'd thought, maybe 10 minutes, before the house loomed up ahead. It was a weathered single-story deal, more like a big shed than a proper cabin, with no garage or anything modern. I crept up to a side window, its glass long gone, and stuck my head in, listening for a good 20 seconds. Dead quiet. The front door hung ajar, hinges rusted, so I nudged it open and stepped inside. The place was a time capsule, rotting, but still holding echoes of whoever lived there. The main room had a sagging armchair, fabric shredded, coated in grime. Faded photos in cracked frames littered the floor. I wandered around the ground level, poking at the debris, old mugs, a busted lamp, wondering who'd left it all behind. It didn't take long to see everything. The layout was tight. A rickety ladder led up to a loft, so I climbed, boards groaning under me. Up top, a short landing split to 2 doors, one ajar, one shut. I peeked into the open room. Bare. Nothing but dust and shadows, a stark contrast to the clutter below. Then, a dull thump from downstairs. My pulse spiked. It wasn't a creak or a settle, too heavy, too deliberate. I scrambled back down, headlamp sweeping the space. Silence pressed in, thick and unnatural. Nothing moved. My gut screamed to bail. I've got a rule with my crew. First weird vibe, we're out. Solo, I wasn't messing around. I bolted for the door, light bouncing, but when I got there it was closed tight. I'd left it gaping. I yanked the knob, locked, or jammed from outside. Panic clawed up my throat. Someone was here, trapping me in. I darted to the broken window, hoisted myself through, and hit the ground running, dousing my headlamp. I veered off the trail, weaving through the trees, breath ragged. Then, lights ahead, cutting through the dark. Red and white, flashing. I ducked behind a trunk as a single sheriff's SUV rolled up the overgrown drive, tires crunching. It stopped at the house, spotlight flaring. I held still, watching as they swept the place. Instinct told me they weren't after me. This was something else. After a tense minute, I booked it out of the woods, back to my place. I scoured local news for days after, fishing for answers, nothing. No reports, no arrests. Whatever went down, whoever was there, it stayed buried. Maybe I dodged something nasty. All I know is I got out, and I'm damn glad for it. This was back in 2017. I was living with my two closest pals, let's call them Nate and Sam, to keep things private. We were roommates in a cramped downtown loft, wrapping up our final semester at a university in a bustling Midwest city. Between classes and part-time gigs, free time was rare, but when we got it, we'd hit the outdoors, hiking trails, or sometimes just driving out to poke around small towns we'd never seen. That week, we all scored a Thursday night and Friday off, so we wanted something fun for Thursday evening. Sam had caught wind from a co-worker about an old, shut-down warehouse just beyond the city limits. It sounded intriguing, maybe a little edgy. None of us had explored anything like it before. We debated, but finally said, "Why not?" and piled into Nate's beat-up SUV. We drove out as the sun dipped low. Our city's a Midwest sprawl. High-rises give way fast to wide, open fields that stretch forever. The warehouse sat out there, a hulking shadow in the flatlands. We didn't have an exact address, just a blurry pin on a Maps app from overhead view. We parked at a shuttered convenience store a couple streets over and hoofed it the rest of the way. The road was a ghost town, no cars, no lights, like the whole area had been left to fade. The building loomed up, bigger than we'd pictured. A sprawling concrete beast with rusted fire escapes twisting up its sides and spray paint splashed across spots no one should have reached. A chain-link fence ringed it, topped with razor wire, but gaps had been snipped wide open by past trespassers. We slipped through and crept up to a side entrance, its steel door hanging loose on its hinges. Stepping inside hit like a punch. The air was cold, and the whole place moaned as gusts outside rattled its bones. It was pitch dark, so we flicked on some flimsy headlamps Sam had dug out of his closet. The first area was a cavern of ancient equipment, towering, corroded presses and tangled pipes, with tight walkways snaking between them. We stuck together at first, roaming the space, marveling at the decay. After a bit, I drifted toward a corridor at the far end. I glanced back, caught a silhouette near one of the machines, close enough to know one of the guys was tailing me. Couldn't tell if it was Nate or Sam in the gloom, but I figured they'd keep up, so I pushed on. The hall led to another heavy door. I shoved it open and stepped through. As it swung shut behind me, footsteps echoed from the way I'd come. Assuming it was the guys, I swept my headlamp around. A long room with a busted assembly line down the middle and a metal catwalk bolted to the ceiling, its access ladder dangling across the way. The door creaked open and clicked shut. "Nate? Sam?" I called, spinning around. My light hit the door, empty. No one. I froze, doubting my ears, but I knew I'd heard it move. "Nate? Sam?" My voice bounced off the walls, unanswered. Unease crept in. I edged back, cracked the door, and aimed my light down the hall. Nothing but shadows. Then a faint scuff like gravel shifting behind me. I whirled, beam landing on a figure maybe 10 feet off. Wild hair, tangled beard, eyes glassy and locked on me. He lunged, arms out like he meant to take me down. I stumbled back, slammed the door in his face, and bolted down the hall. From the main room, Nate and Sam were shouting my name, voices frantic. I burst in yelling, "Go, go, go!" We tore out, scrambling over the fence and back to the car. Panting, I spilled it all. Some creep had tailed me from the hall, waited for me to split off. He'd been ready to pounce. What he wanted? No clue, and I'm damn glad I didn't stick around to find out. We haven't touched anything like that since. This was about 4 years back, when I was still in high school. My closest buddy, let's call him Dylan, was my go-to hangout partner. After school, we'd roam around, hitting up odd corners of town just for kicks. This happened right as fall break kicked off, giving us a stretch of free days with zero plans. We'd spent most of that first day holed up at his place, messing around on his PlayStation, but by evening, we were restless. We needed to stretch our legs, go somewhere. Our town's got this old, abandoned schoolhouse out on a dead-end lane, half hidden by overgrown oaks, left to crumble since forever. Growing up, it freaked me out, but now it piqued my curiosity. So when Dylan and I were wandering near the edge of town and past that lonely road, we figured, why not scope it out? It was dusk, the sky dim but lit by a sharp crescent moon, just enough to see without squinting. We had our phones for backup light. The lane was a wreck, pavement buckled, roots and weeds clawing through. By the time we reached the schoolhouse, the main street was lost behind us, swallowed by the trees. Up close, it was spookier than I'd pictured, vines strangling the chain-link fence, windows dark and gaping. We slipped through a gap in the fence, the quiet pressing in heavy. No voices, no rustling, just us. The front doors sagged open, warped with groaning as we nudged them wider. The sound bounced through the hollow space. We paused at the threshold, peering in. The main room, an old auditorium maybe, stretched out with rows of benches, eerily intact. No trash, no tags, just dust and stillness like time forgot it. I stepped inside, Dylan trailing me, our footsteps ringing off the high ceiling. We crept down the center aisle, my phone light flicking over the pews. Near the front, a loud crack split the air. We both flinched, fumbling for our flashlights, beams darting wild. The echo made it impossible to pinpoint. Could have been anywhere. Dylan muttered something about a side room near the back, maybe a shelf tipping over. Shaking it off, we kept going. I climbed onto the low stage at the end, scanning back toward the entrance, too dark to see much. Dylan suggested checking the side room, so we doubled back. A narrow door hung ajar on the left wall. I pushed it open, light sweeping in, a cluttered mess of overturned desks and stacked crates, like an old supply closet. We poked around, then froze. A soft tap, then another, footsteps, slow and steady, crossing the main hall we'd just left. They moved from the stage toward the doors. Through the slim gap in our doorway, we strained to see pitch black out there. Then, for a heartbeat, a shadow slid past, slipping out the entrance. The doors creaked shut, and the steps died. We stood, breaths held, trading wide-eyed looks. Run. Hide. We didn't know. We just waited, tense and silent, for what felt like ages, hoping they were gone. Finally, we bolted, out the room, through the entrance, down the wrecked lane, not stopping until we hit pavement. Whoever it was had come from the stage end, where I'd stood minutes before. No exits there, just walls. They'd been lurking close, maybe watching. Human or not, I can't say. Years on, it's still a blank, a shiver I can't shake. This was a few years back. I was crashing at my buddy's house for a long weekend while she and her folks were off on a beach trip. She'd left me in charge of her little dog, Rusty, a scrappy mutt who hated loud weather. A big storm was forecast to roll through, and it had already started the day before she split. Rain and thunder stuck around the whole time I was there. It was Friday afternoon, and I'd spent the previous night without a hitch. Rusty handled the rumbling sky like a champ, mostly napping wherever he pleased. I kicked back on her overstuffed recliner that morning, flipping through a paperback. Her place was a cabin tucked out in the hills, quiet, cut off, the kind of spot that feels like a retreat. Around noon, the landline rang. This was when those were still a thing. I glanced over, thinking it might be her checking in, but the caller ID just read no name. I let it go. 5 minutes later, it rang again, same deal, no name. It cut to the machine, and a low voice crackled through. Just one word, her name, like a question. Then a pause, a click, and nothing. I didn't recognize it. Could have been a relative or some guy she knew. So I shot her a quick text about it. Odd that it was unlisted, though. Over the next couple hours, the phone rang twice more, same no name, no messages. She didn't reply, probably busy with her trip. I brushed it off, made a sandwich, and lazed around. By 7 p.m. or so, I settled upstairs in her guest room with a random DVD. Halfway through, I remembered Rusty, time to check his bowls. Downstairs, I found him parked by the back door, ears up, staring at the gap like he was expecting company. I called him, and he flicked his eyes at me before snapping back to the door. It sent a chill up my spine. I edged over and pressed my face to the peephole. The glass was smeared with rain, everything hazy, but something shifted out there, big enough to be a person, too vague to tell. I watched, breath shallow, trying to decide if it was real. A few minutes passed, no movement. If someone was there, wouldn't they knock? I chalked it up to nerves, topped off Rusty's water, and grabbed a soda. Passing the door again, Rusty was gone. I peeked out, same blur, but one shape seemed missing, like it had slipped away. Had someone been standing there? Uneasy, I scooped Rusty up and hauled him upstairs. I hit play on the movie, but my mind wouldn't settle. About 20 minutes later, Rusty bolted off the bed and posted up at the bedroom door. Same stare, locked on the crack. My pulse kicked up. I whispered his name, shaky, but he didn't budge. I crept over, ear to the wood, dead quiet. Then I dropped low, peering under the gap. My stomach lurched, boots inches away, right outside. I jolted back, fumbling for the knob. I hadn't locked it. I snapped it shut just as footsteps thudded away, down the stairs, fading out. I dialed 911, then my friend. Cops showed up, searched the place, empty, no one around. With the calls and all, they figured it was a stalker, probably the same guy phoning. They tried tracing the number, dead end. That's where it stopped. I feel awful for her. That creep was after her, not me. Maybe he thought the place was vacant since I didn't pick up, or he was waiting for her to come home. We'll never know who he was or what he wanted. This was late October last year. I'd just been let go from my gig at a warehouse, downsizing, they said. I had enough cash stashed to float me while I hunted for something new. For a couple weeks, I was cooped up in my apartment, scrolling job boards on my tablet. By week 3, I was antsy, no bites on anything I'd applied for, despite firing off resumes left and right. I switched up my search, poking around lesser-known sites. One finally paid off. I spotted a handful of postings, and by afternoon, got a reply. The email came from a guy named Miles, claiming to be a hiring lead. He said his week was slammed, but wanted to squeeze in an interview that evening if I could swing it. I wasn't prepped, and the rush felt off, but I didn't want to miss out. Showing up last minute might prove I was serious, right? It was a basic admin gig, decent pay, nothing flashy. I said yes, and Miles shot me an address, telling me to be there at 6:45 p.m. I threw on a jacket and drove over, pulling in 10 minutes early. I hadn't dug into the company, no time, so I rolled up blind. The spot was a lone brick building off a quiet road, no signage, just a faded number above the door. I figured it was an office, but every window was dark, and the lot was deserted. My gut twisted. I double-checked the address, matched perfectly, but a quick search turned up nothing, no business name, no listing. I dialed the number from Miles's email. Straight to voicemail. Tried twice more, same deal. I sat there until 7 o'clock, then bailed. Empty building, no answer, no cars, too weird. I should have sniffed out the red flags sooner. Back home, I was annoyed but ready to let it go. I'd stick to the big job sites from now on, and pick up the hunt tomorrow. Grabbing a soda from the kitchen, I flopped on the recliner and flipped on the radio. Unemployed, no schedule, might as well unwind. Over the next few hours, I kept catching faint noises upstairs, like a floorboard settling. I glanced outside, no breeze, no weather to blame. It didn't faze me much, old places creak. Around 9:30, I got drowsy, killed the radio, and trudged upstairs. I climbed into bed, out like a light in minutes. Then I snapped awake, dark room, dead silent. That creak again, sharper, closer, somewhere across the bedroom. I squinted into the shadows, bleary-eyed, and caught it, the soft scrape of my wardrobe door easing open. My breath hitched. I couldn't move, just watched, half sure I was dreaming. When it stopped and a shape leaned out, tall, still, panic kicked in. I snatched my phone, rolled out of bed on the far side, and bolted upright. The figure didn't budge, just stared, like they thought I'd missed them in the dark. My vision cleared, real, no question. I tore out of the room, dialing 911 as I stumbled outside. I stood in the driveway, eyes glued to the open front door and the stairs beyond. Stupid, maybe, but I wanted them caught. Could have been armed, could have been bad news, but I held my ground. A patrol car rolled up minutes later. I pointed them to the bedroom. I hadn't seen anyone slip out. They went in, found him, still crouched in the wardrobe. When they hauled him out, he was a wreck, greasy matted hair, tattered shirt, eyes wild and hollow. He didn't say a word. Took a day or two to piece it together. He'd been posting fake jobs across random sites, dozens of them, all kinds. He'd snagged my address from my application, knew I'd be out for the interview, and broken while I was gone. He'd been in there all night, steps away while I slept. Why? No confession, no clue, just a blank slate of intent that still keeps me up. This was late September last year. I live out in the sticks, rolling scrubland stretching endless in every direction. There's a state road a few miles off, the only asphalt around. The rest is dust tracks or patchy stone if you're lucky. The nearest village is a 30-minute haul, barely a blip on the map. I'm 47, early retired, so I mostly stick to my place. It was a typical day, gray and damp. Drizzle had been falling for days. Around mid-morning, I stepped onto my side deck with a mug of tea to watch the weather roll through. I lingered there, maybe 45 minutes, when I spotted movement down the long, rutted lane to my property. Flat country means you can see forever, even with the mist fuzzing things up. It was a figure on a rugged off-road bike, cutting through the wet. Odd, nobody wanders out here, but I figured they'd misread my track for a trail. They didn't turn, though. They rolled right up near my shed before stopping. Guy looked middle-aged, wore a tinted visor helmet. He sat there, staring at the house, then clocked me. After a beat, he spun around and peeled back the way he came. Weirdest thing I'd seen out here in ages. No reason for it. I chalked it up to a fluke and stayed out until the wind kicked up, driving me in. Inside, I brushed it off. Brewed more tea, called my sister for a bit, dozed on the couch. Easy day, no chores nagging me. The rain turned nasty by 7 p.m., gusts howling, lightning flashing, water pounding the tin roof. Through the racket, I caught it, a low growl, that same bike engine slicing the storm. I crossed to the back window, squinting out. A faint glow pierced the haze, weaving closer, then winked out. Gone. I strained to see, but the dark swallowed everything. They didn't roll up to the shed this time. Minutes dragged, nothing. Out here, you can't just ring the cops over a hunch, so I was solo. I fetched my rifle from the hall closet, kept it for peace of mind, never needed it till then. Lost traveler? Trouble? No idea, but I wasn't taking chances in this nowhere spot. For the next half hour, I paced, checking every window. Empty, until I hit the kitchen and froze. Something flickered in the murk outside, darting off as my eyes locked on. A shiver crawled up my spine. The unknown gnawed at me. Then sloshing steps, right against the walls, mud squelching under boots. I'd lean out a window, and they'd shift, always just out of sight. My nerves frayed. Letting this drag could turn ugly. They weren't here to chat. I ducked into the shed, climbed into my Jeep, and hit the opener. Heart hammering, I eased out, swung the door shut, and nosed the rig toward the yard. I cranked the headlights and flipped on the roof rack floods. Light blasted the house. There he was, pinned in the glare, black gear head to toe, crowbar gripped in one hand, peering at a side window. Maybe the storm masked my engine. He hadn't bolted yet. Then he spun, dashed around back, and I glimpsed him haul a bike from the brush. He roared off into the night. I didn't sleep a wink. Next morning, I drove to the county sheriff and laid it out. That crowbar said plenty. He wasn't sightseeing. I'm just glad I didn't have to test his plans. It was a dreary Thursday last fall, the kind where the chill seeps into your bones, and the rain taps a restless rhythm all day. I had no plans, so I holed up inside, messing around on my console, just coasting through a lazy day. By late afternoon, around 4:30, the drizzle turned into a full-on deluge, with flashes of thunder rumbling far off. I threw together a quick meal, some pasta and sauce, then figured the stormy vibe was perfect for a thriller flick. I killed the lights, sank into my beat-up armchair, and let the next couple hours roll by, the weather outside cranking up the tension. No power flickers or anything dramatic, just sheets of water hammering the windows and lightning cracking closer than before. It was pushing 9 p.m. when the credits rolled. I wasn't wiped out yet, just restless, so I stood to stretch and grab a soda from the kitchen. As I turned toward the den's archway, something darted across my vision, a dark smear on the wall, gone in a blink. I stopped cold, squinting into the dimness, too fast to pin down, too fleeting to trust. I shook it off, edging over to poke around. Nothing but bare plaster and shadows. Probably just lightning bouncing off the glass. I told myself. That movie had me jumpy, and my brain was playing tricks. I brushed it aside, snagged my drink, and peeked out the front window. The wind was tearing at the shrubs, rain pooling in the yard. Wild for our quiet little hamlet, where storms like this were rare and the old streets couldn't handle the runoff. Back in the den, I flopped down and fired up some random streams on my tablet, hoping to wind down. I wasn't really locked in, just letting the noise fill the room while my mind drifted. Then it happened again. A shadow slid across the wall behind the screen, like something had leaned out from the hall for a heartbeat. I whipped around, neck prickling, empty doorway still air. I got up, paced the space, checked every corner. Zip. Was I losing it? Twice now. I didn't feel drowsy, just wired from the flick and the howling gale outside. What was supposed to be a cozy night was turning into a twitchy mess. I tried to laugh it off, but a nagging itch in my gut wouldn't quit. After another 20 minutes fidgeting in the chair, I called it and headed upstairs. Sleep wasn't coming easy, not with my nerves buzzing, so I hit the bathroom for a hot shower to settle down. I cranked the faucet, letting the steam build, and stood under the spray for maybe 10 minutes. Then a sharp bang cut through the water's hiss, loud enough to rattle the tiles. My skin prickled as I shut off the tap, threw on a shirt and jeans, and stood dripping in the sudden hush. The quiet was thick, almost buzzing in my ears after that jolt. I crept out, easing down the creaky staircase, peering into the gloom of the main floor. The den was fine, but in the kitchen, chaos. The side door hung limp, dangling from one bent hinge, the frame splintered, shards of wood scattered across the linoleum. The other hinges were torn clean out. I bolted back upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and dialed 911, pulse hammering. I was sure I was pinned in with someone. Those shadows hadn't been my imagination. But when the deputies showed up, sweeping the place top to bottom, it flipped. The door wasn't busted in, it was busted out. Someone had been inside, and they'd hauled off, slamming it so hard it shredded the frame. They'd been here all night, slipping around, dodging my sight. Those flickers I'd caught were them, no doubt. How long? Why? The wrecked door felt like a tantrum, like they were pissed to leave. Cops found no trace, no answers. I've barely slept right since. Every creak in this old place feels like eyes in the dark. This was last spring, sometime in early March, I think. Hard to pin down exactly, but I remember the ground was soaked from days of heavy sleet. I rarely left my place that week because of it. I've got a mixed gig, part remote, part at the shop, so with the weather turning nasty, I opted to clock in from home all week. My setup's modest, a tiny table in my attic loft, squeezed into a corner of my one-level cottage. Just one bedroom, a spare nook, and me. That day, I rolled out of bed, brewed some tea, and parked myself at the table, grinding through work, till about 7:30 p.m. outside. The wind howled, whipping icy slush against the panes. When I finally peeled myself away, I heated up some soup, tidied the kitchen, then tugged on a coat to haul the recycling out back. Trudging toward the shed, I caught something off to the right of the cottage. Where the sleet had settled thick and smooth everywhere else, this patch was churned up. I shuffled over, boots crunching, and saw it clear as day. Boot tracks, a jagged line cutting close along the wall. That set me on edge. They weren't just nearby, they hugged the house. I traced them, heart ticking faster, down the side until they stopped in a messy swirl right under the loft's skylight, where I'd been hunched over my laptop all day. Freaky as hell. It was bitter out, gusts biting. Why would anyone be tromping around in this? The shade was down, but light could have seeped through the edges. Were they peering in? I tried to shake it off, told myself I was jumping at shadows, and ducked back inside to thaw out. The tracks were old news now, nobody lingered. I finished my night, crashing around 10:30 after one last glance out the skylight. Fresh sleet had smoothed over the prints, no new ones in sight. I double-locked it, feeling lighter, and hit the sack. Slept solid. Next morning, I stumbled to the window first thing, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and froze. New tracks, crisp and deep, right back in the same damn spot under the glass. I yanked on a sweater and galoshes, bolted out, and there they were. Same path, same churn beneath the loft. No other marks fanned out across the yard, just those like a laser straight to my window. I scanned the empty white expanse, but nothing stirred. Back inside, I rang the local sheriff's non-emergency line, spilling the weirdness. I knew they couldn't swoop in over footprints, but I wanted it logged, just in case. Then I dove back into work, stealing looks outside every hour. The sleet filled in the tracks by noon, and I didn't spot a thing after. Quitting time hit at 7:30 again. Darkness had swallowed the day, wind still rattling the cottage. I stepped to the skylight, nudged the shade aside, clean snow untouched. Relief washed over me, but as I let the fabric drop, my gut lurched. The latch was flipped open. I'd swear I'd locked it tight last night, hadn't touched it since. I tested it, slid smooth and silent. My pulse hammered. Someone had popped it, probably overnight. Had they slipped in? I edged into the hall, eyes darting over every corner, every shadow, inching toward the back door. I grabbed my keys, jammed my feet into boots, and bolted to my truck, locking the doors as I dialed 911. The snow was too thick to drive out, so I sat tight in the driveway, shivering. After what felt like forever, maybe 15 minutes, a deputy rolled up. He went in to sweep the place. Time crawled. 5 minutes stretched too long, and dread crept in. Then he emerged, hauling a guy in cuffs, both streaked with blood like they'd tangled hard. The deputy said he'd found him crammed in the pantry, ambushing him when he got close. The guy was wiry, maybe 50, with a gaunt, hollow stare that screamed trouble. No word on what he wanted, but the fight he put up said plenty. I can't guess how bad it might have gotten if he'd stayed hidden any longer. This was last fall, during my college's autumn break. I decided to visit my folks, and since their town was a quiet little speck, I figured I'd try a rental app for the first time. Cheaper than the lone motel. After a 3-day haul across winding back roads, I rolled into the gravel lot just as dusk settled. Stepping out with my bags, I scanned the area. Something felt off, stillness hung heavy. No street lamps buzzed, no cars hummed, no neighbors stirred. The rental, a squat cabin, glowed alone in the dark, while the other homes, shabby bungalows mostly, sat dim, maybe a faint flicker in one or two. It wasn't even late, but the place felt abandoned. Small towns have their quirks, I guessed, and shrugged it off. I lugged my stuff inside, dumped it in a corner, and settled in. No agenda beyond crashing after the drive. I munched on a granola bar, flipped on a show in the loft bedroom, and zoned out. A few hours ticked by, probably nearing 8:30 or 9 o'clock, when a noise pricked my ears from downstairs. I muted the tablet and held still. Then it came again, a sharp rap at the side door. I checked my phone for a heads-up from the owner. Nothing. The knocking didn't quit, steady and insistent, so I patted down, figuring it wasn't some random hawker. I swung the door wide. A guy stood there, mid-20s, scruffy beard, gray beanie, faded blue jacket, looking startled to see me. I said hello. He flashed a tight grin, muttered something low, then turned and shuffled off toward the road. I watched, baffled, as he faded into the gloom, then locked up tight. What was that? Wrong address, maybe too shy to admit it? I climbed back upstairs, brushing it off. The night rolled on uneventfully. Next morning, I headed out to my parents' place, catching up until around 5 p.m. Back at the rental, I was beat, kicked back in the loft with the TV on low, winding down. Right around 8:30, though, that same rap echoed up again, same rhythm, same door. This time, unease trumped curiosity. I checked my phone, no messages. Cautious, I crept to the door and peeked through the sidelight. Same guy, beanie jacket, staring blankly. I cracked the door an inch and asked what he wanted. His face twitched, like I'd thrown him off again, then went slack. You all right? Looking for someone? I pressed. No, he droned, flat and lifeless, before turning and trudging away. Creepy didn't cover it. Who was he after? Why come back? I retreated to the loft, leaving the door ajar to the hall, ears perked. This wasn't right. Hours later, past 11 o'clock, I killed the lights and crawled into bed. Sleep hit fast, but I jolted awake in the dead of night. Room pitch black, silence thick. A faint murmur drifted from outside, like a hushed voice, then, bam, a hard pound rattled the front door. My skin prickled. The knocks kept coming, jarring the walls. I slipped out of bed, edging down the hall. A shadow flitted past the kitchen window, quick, deliberate. At the door's peephole, I spotted him again, the beanie guy, but back in the yard, another figure lurked, half hidden, watching. My limbs went cold, adrenaline surging. I spun to grab my phone from the loft, but froze, a face pressed to the rear window, eyes boring in. I bolted upstairs as chaos erupted, footsteps, too many, thundering around the cabin. Doors rattled, windows shook, sounded like a pack, not a pair. I dialed 911, heart slamming, as the house groaned under their probing. Minutes dragged, felt like hours, until sirens wailed faint in the distance. The noise vanished, they scattered fast. Cops swept the place, found nothing but scuff marks in the dirt. The rental app host got looped in, grumpy more than worried, which struck me as odd after that nightmare. No leads turned up, even later. My theory? Some guy who'd crashed here before knew those creeps, or crossed them, and they thought he was still around. Me answering threw them off, maybe pissed them off, or they figured I was covering for him. Could have been unhinged drifters, too. The host's vibe didn't help. Maybe he was tangled up somehow, his address a breadcrumb. Whatever they wanted, I'm just glad I never found out. This was a few months back, late into a chilly Friday night. I was hustling for a delivery gig, think app-based food runs. Usually wrapping up around 2 a.m. night owl life suits me, so these graveyard shifts were my norm. Things were dragging that night, though. I cruised the empty streets, radio humming low, waiting for a ping. When one finally hit, I didn't even skim it, just tapped accept, desperate for action. I swung by a 24-hour burger joint, grabbed the order, a greasy sack of fries and a shake, and let the app chart my route. It was a 20-minute trek from there. The drive was dead quiet, just tires on wet pavement, no chatter in my head, just autopilot. About a block out, the app nudged me off the main drag into what I'd call a warehouse district, but not the shiny kind. Most drop-offs I'd done were to sleek corporate parks, trimmed lawns, glass towers. This place was a ghost town, sagging brick hulks, windows dark or busted, weeds clawing up through cracked lots. It threw me off, but I'd hauled food to late-night workers before, so I rolled with it. The map zeroed in on a stubby, single-story shed of a building, as weathered as the rest. It didn't scream office, more like a forgotten storage unit. The app pointed me around to what felt like the rear, though the layout was a mess. I checked the notes for clues, but a text popped up from the buyer. Saw you pull up, bring it to the rusted side door on your left. Fair enough. I parked tight to the wall, hopped out with the bag, and scoped the spot. It was the backside for sure. No signage, just a cluster of dented exits and a loading hatch. I zeroed in on the rusted door. No handle label, no window, just a slab of faded steel. As I closed in, another ping. Come right in with it. I didn't overthink it. Standard request, right? I tugged the door open and stepped into a narrow corridor. No overheads blazed, just faint emergency bulbs dotting the ceiling, casting a weak, yellowish glow. I'd expected a break room or a desk, some obvious drop point, not this empty tunnel. Was I supposed to wander deeper? Wait for him. I fished out my phone to shoot a message when a sharp snap echoed behind me. I spun, the door wouldn't budge. Locked. My stomach dropped, cold sweat prickling my neck. What the hell? I ditched the food, yanking harder, nothing. The hall stretched ahead, my only shot at an out. I started moving, fast but quiet, when a hinge creaked somewhere distant in the building, followed by a soft thud. Someone else was in here. I bolted to the corridor's end, shoved through another door, and hit a second passage, lined with shadowed doorways just as dim. Footsteps clapped from the far end, closing in. I ducked into a side room, empty, dusty, a husk of an office, and crouched low. Seconds later, the steps stormed past, charging toward the first hall I'd fled. I seized the chance, darting the way they'd come, praying for daylight. Luck held, an exit loomed ahead. I burst out, sprinted to my car, and peeled away, fumbling a call to the cops. The dispatcher sounded skeptical, and by the time a patrol swung by, half an hour later, the place was deserted. Word came back that the building had been shuttered for years, half abandoned, no security cams, no trace. If I'd lingered in that first hall, got cornered. What then? No clue, but I'm not rolling the dice on sketchy drops again.